Ms Dimitriadis loves being a mother, but she admits what some mothers feel guilty confessing to, which is that having a strike day, or in her case, simply a few hours a week away from child raising and unpaid domestic work, is important for one's sanity. Sometimes it can become a bit exhausting, she says. When, the baby is crying and she's not feeling well. She's not sleeping. And you don't know why, even though you've tried just about everything under the sun. Just having that time away kind of just makes it much more enjoyable when you get back. Ms Dimitriadis with 4-month-old baby Cleo. When Ms Dimitriadis fell pregnant, she had to quit her full-time job as a lawyer. When Ms Dimitriadis fell pregnant more than 1 year ago, she had to quit her full-time job as a lawyer. I had a lot of nausea and vomiting to the point where I couldn't work, she says. I had to give up. I resigned. It just wasn't good for the company, or for me. Instead, she worked 5-hour weekend shifts at a pharmacy as well as doing voluntary work as a local government councillor. After she gave birth to Cleo 4 months ago, she realized it was the right decision to quit the legal profession, as holding 3 jobs with an infant would have been impossible. Child raising has been a lot of work, she says. Her husband, electrical engineer Sean Nettleton, is the primary income earner. Ms Dimitriadis still works occasional weekend shifts at the pharmacy, but her full-time job is unpaid, raising Cleo and doing most of the domestic household chores. At the moment, my engineering role pays more, significantly more so, Mr. Nettleton says. So financially, it makes sense for me to do the bulk of the full-time work. It's a common story across Australia. Sean Nettleton, baby Cleo, and Ms Dimitriadis at their Fairfield home. More than half of employed men do no, or less than 5 hours per week of unpaid domestic work. The 2016 census found that more than half of employed men did nil, or less than 5 hours per week of unpaid domestic work, compared with about 1/3 of employed women. It found that men were also less likely than women to do 15 hours or more per week of unpaid domestic work. This pattern applied across all hours of paid work, even for those working more than 49 hours per week. More recent data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics gave some insights into the impact the COVID-19 pandemic had on households across Australia. The Household Impacts of COVID-19 survey, conducted between May 14 to 23, 2021, found that women were more likely than men to have spent time on unpaid indoor housework, cooking and the care or supervision of children. It found that 62% of women spent 5 or more hours in the week on unpaid indoor housework, compared with 35% of men. Women also took on more caring responsibilities than men, spending 5 or more hours in the week on unpaid caring or supervision of children, care of adults, and cooking and baking. Men were slightly more likely than women to have spent 5 or more hours on outdoor chores and repairs. When women leave their full-time paid jobs to have children, it's typically hard to get them back at the same hours, even once the child grows older. I would like to return and do work more hours, and Sean would be more than happy to be a stay-at-home dad, Ms Dimitriadis says. But it's just unfortunate that the circumstances currently don't allow us to do that. The $345 billion value of unpaid work to Australia's economy. Consultancy firm PwC has attempted to measure the value of unpaid childcare to Australia's economy in dollar terms. It asked the question, why is it that a mother caring for her children produces no measured economic value, but the same mother hiring others to look after her children does? Its 2017 report estimated the value of unpaid activities across 2,214 locations. It found that if the total economy includes a conservative estimate of the value of unpaid childcare, then, in 2011 terms, it is a $345 billion sector. If you were to add that to the economy, or call it an industry, childcare would be the largest industry in the Australian economy, bigger than financial services, says PwC partner Amy Auster. Amy Auster says if all the unpaid childcare done by women was measured, it would be a sector bigger than financial services. Keep in mind that's only unpaid childcare work. That doesn't include other kinds of unpaid work. PwC's report found that women account for most unpaid work, such as domestic household chores and other types of caring and volunteer work. It said women conduct 76% of childcare, 67% of domestic work, 69% of care of adults, and 57% of volunteering. Its report also looked at results by location. In more advantaged areas, couples may substitute unpaid work for paid domestic help. If a household had 20 hours of unpaid work a week, a woman would conduct 15 hours of it, and a man 5 hours. However, if they paid someone to take 10 hours of that household work, although the woman would halve her unpaid hours to 7.5 hours, the man would reduce his to 2.5 hours. If men want to play a greater role in unpaid childcare, do they have to quit their jobs? Reversing the trend where women do the bulk of unpaid work is a challenge. But some families have managed to. For Dinah Thomasette and her husband, Shane Hearn, sharing the role more evenly involved many serious conversations and life-changing choices. Dinah Thomasette, Maeva, Noah and Shane Hearn. The couple share the duties of child raising and domestic housework. Mr. Hearn chose to quit his full-time executive role just before the pandemic to spend more time with his family. He now works in a consultancy role from home. Post the birth of her second child, Ms. Thomasette suffered postnatal depression, and Mr. Hearn decided it was time for him to step in and help with raising their two children, Maeva and Noah. I think one of the spillages from the COVID pandemic was that it gave us more time at home and uncovered a new way of working, Mr. Hearn says. I wanted to support my wife, Dinah. She was carrying a full load, and we had to deal with some health issues. I wanted the flexibility so that I could be at home and spend more time with my children. The couple now share school drop-offs and pickups, as well as domestic duties. We try to be fair with each other, and then with the house chores, Ms. Thomasette says. We try to basically split, not only the task or the to-do lists, but also the mental load. She says aside from helping develop a better relationship between them and with their kids, it's allowed her to also focus on rebuilding her career. It's a beautiful balance, to be able to give your full self to the things that matter to you, she says. Dinah Thomasette says it is important for couples to share the load of child raising and domestic housework. Call for free childcare, flexible work. Ms. Thomasette says having free or more heavily subsidized childcare and flexible work options would be a game changer in helping more women get back to work. She says during the pandemic, for a few months, we realized how important it is to have access to quality early learning. To be able to have more affordable childcare options, or even free childcare options, would benefit both parents, she says. It allows the parents to either go back to work or to have some time off with the children because the mum can return to the workforce. She says employers also are starting to be more flexible in the work options they offer families with kids. One of them is to be able to work part-time or flexible time, half work home, half in the office. And I feel like with the pandemic, we realize that it's so easy to work from home. Mr. Nettleton says paid parental leave for dads is another important policy. He had to dip into his annual leave to take time off when Cleo was born. He says if paid parental leave was more generous, he would have taken more time off work to help his wife. I had to use a combination of carer's leave and annual leave, but not everybody is in the situation where they have that saved up, he says. Even then, that was only 3 weeks. How one company is using paid parental leave to help dads take on primary carer role. Medibank Chief Executive and Champions of Change Coalition member David Kochkar says men can take a greater role in unpaid care. Mr. Kochkar currently takes time out of his work to attend to caring for his elderly parents Valerie and George Kochkar. Medibank CEO David Kochkar, with parents Valerie and George Kochkar. Mr.